I just had a song called Our Country, which I allowed Chevrolet to use. And a lot of people thought, well, Mellencamp sold out. No, man, I sold out the minute I signed with the record company.
So, John, it's been said that your new album, Freedom's Road, juggles optimism and cynicism. Would you say that's an accurate description?
Yeah, I'd say that was a pretty good description. I would describe it a little differently. I mean, in my mind, it's an old-time protest record of sort of what has been going on the last 4 or 5 years in the country.
But it's interesting because there's certainly those elements in the record, but the record also has very much of an uplifting and I think almost a positive message throughout it as well. It is very optimistic. I think people dwell on that one side of it, but maybe not so much the other side.
Well, I was very cognizant when I was writing the songs to try to write on a couple different levels. You take a song like Ghost Towns Along the Highway. At first listen, you would think that it's a song about location and what's happened to small towns in America. But actually, to me, it's a very personal song. Ghost Towns on the Highway are things that we leave behind as people and the decisions we've made, the road that each individual is traveling. And but you can listen, there's 2 different levels to a lot of these songs. A song like The Americans, a lot of people think it's a patriotic song, but in reality, it's saying, these stereotypes that we have created for ourselves so that we can feel good about ourselves, as opposed to saying, well, we're hated all over the world. Oh, we can't say that. So, we have to pretend and present ourselves in a way that's probably not true. It would be great if we were that way, but we're not, But if you would ask someone from the Midwest how they are, this is what they would say in there. It's a song of cliche things that we've made up about ourselves, but they're not true.
It's interesting that you mentioned that, because that theme goes all the way back with you to something like Pink Houses.
Yes.
And it's interesting, do you find that frustrating at all as a songwriter, that sometimes the deeper message doesn't really connect to the guy who just wants to drink a beer and pump his fist in the air and they get in the wrong message?
Well, it's not just that guy. It's it's a lot of people, and sometimes it just doesn't work, But on some levels, it works great. There's a lot of people who will hear that song and they'll love it for that reason. And that's the great thing about songs, I mean, you can put into it what you want, and I'm also a painter. I have to laugh to myself when people look at my paintings and make something out of them that's just not there, So it's all subjective, and but I was very aware of what was being said in a lot of these songs, like the Americans, that it sounds as if I'm saying. But a friend of mine said it very well. He said, John, if Randy Newman sang these songs, people would get them immediately, but because it's you and they don't know really where you stand, they're confused by it.
It reminds me also, going back to the days of one of the most famous instances of that was Springsteen's Born in the USA, when it was used in a campaign rally, not really people recognizing what, Bruce was actually, it was an anti-political statement, but it was being used by politicians at the time as a war cry. So you're certainly not the first artist that's had that distinction. And one of the words that I know that actually you're comfortable with in describing this album and the music that you make is controversy. You like your music to be somewhat controversial. Is that accurate?
Well, I would. I don't think I have much choice. It just seems that when I do something, there's always some sort of controversy, and it's not on purpose, but I just never really check in to see what I'm supposed to be doing.
Right.
I don't call, hey, should I be doing this? I just do, and I have always done what felt correct at the moment, and followed that path for that time being.
And with that in mind, you've also said that this album, Freedom's Road, you feel strongly is really you kind of getting back on track a little bit. You felt that your last few albums maybe weren't as strong or maybe weren't in the right place, that this is really, you feel this is your best work in a while, right?
Well, the other records, I mean, in my entire career, I've really had a rough time with record companies. I don't know,
Why do you think that is?
Well, because of the things they ask you to do, and, people, I just had a song called Our Country, which I allowed Chevrolet to use. And a lot of people thought, well, Mellencamp sold out. No, man, I sold out the minute I signed with the record company. Record companies a long time ago were individually owned and they cared about artists, but as soon as they became corporations, what's the difference between Chevrolet and Sony? There's no difference. It's just that Chevrolet's a little bit better record company than Sony is. And the fact that, they say they're going to do something, they did it. Mm-hmm. Sony would say, I was on Sony for 10 years, and every time, we're going to do this, they didn't do anything. And they didn't help the creative process.
Let me ask you more specifically about Our Country, which has become the signature track on this record, the track that, being that it was in the commercial, it was the first thing that alerted me to the fact that, hey, John Mellencamp has a new record out. So it worked on that level. Now, in the past, you had been somewhat critical of artists putting music in commercials.
Listen, I still don't think people should have to, but,
Tell me why it made sense for you this time.
I don't even know when it made sense for me to do it, but here's what happened. I have always, and still don't think that it's the proper thing to do, but there's always a but, isn't there?
Pretty much always.
In today's record world, there's not a lot of ways for, this is my 22nd album. And if I want my message to be heard, I had to find alternative ways of doing it. While I was making this record, I started last May, I was driving back and forth to my studio, and every day this other guy who's about my age had just put out a really nice record, and I kept waiting to hear that record on the radio. I finally had to go to his website to hear it, and then finally I had to go buy it. And at the same time, Chevrolet's talking to me, and I kind of thought, man, if they're not going to play this guy's record, they're not going to play anybody's record.
And that guy was?
Well, it was Tom Petty's record. It was a fantastic song, and I never heard it on the radio.
Yeah, this single Saving Grace was some of the best stuff he's done.
It was fabulous. Beautiful song, and I thought, wow. And so, that was part of my thought process. I was kind of on the fence about it, but I was just, it just struck me sideways that song wasn't getting played. And so, when they asked me, I said, well, all right.
Had that particular song had lived for a little while, right? Had that song been recorded previously? Because you were doing it in shows as well, weren't you, prior to recording it?
Yeah, that song, I don't even know that Our Country was even going to be on Freedom's Road, because it's an older song. I wrote the song after I saw Bush. They interviewed Bush at his highest moment, right after he was reelected, I think, and they asked him if he thought the Dixie Chicks were being treated fairly, and he said, well, there's a price for freedom, and they're paying it. They had the freedom to say what they wanted to say, and they said it, and now they get what they get. I thought, ooh, such compassion, from the leader of our country. That's really great to set. So I wrote Our Country, and just kind of a little reference. It says, from the East Coast to the West Coast on the Dixie Highway back home. The Dixie Highway is actually a road that goes from Key West to, Kentucky. Mm-hmm. But, so I just kind of put that in there because they were on, that statement that Bush made was on my mind when I wrote the song. So that's how old the song is. It was written after the last election.
And now that it's become so ingrained in, people that have heard it so many times, the commercial's been airing since mid-2006, actually. Right. Looking back on it, are you happy you made the decision? Do you feel it was effective? Was it the right thing to do?
Well, I think that, it's not, nothing is that simple. I think that I'll say this, I had a song once upon a time called Jack and Diane that got played so much that even I would change it when it came on, when it came on the radio station. And I think it's kind of funny, you know, and it was on MTV, it just started, and it was on MTV. They had like 2 videos, mine and Sting's, and they played those 2 videos all the time. So, I mean, it couldn't have been any more overexposed if you would have tried. Now, Chevrolet played this song, you know, to, even I would be, not again, but, you know, but here it is 30 years later, and people still know that song. And everybody has forgotten that once upon a time, that song was overexposed.
Right.
So here I am again with a song that clearly is overexposed. I mean, you hear it all the time. And I'm in virgin territory because nobody's really done it. Dylan did it with iPod for 4 weeks before his record came out. Gave them a song that no one had heard, that wasn't already a hit, that wasn't a single. Nobody had really heard this song unless you came to my concerts. It had never been released as a single, so I'm kind of in virgin territory here, you know.
Well, it's a testament to your ability as a songwriter, though, that they would want a song that is not so universally known, that they're essentially helping to break the song for you, you know?
Well, you know, I think that they also, you know, they took their whole campaign from that song. I mean, you know, Our Country is their campaign for that vehicle. And, you know, anymore, I just think that you're going to have artists are going to have to find alternative ways to get their records out, because record companies just don't have the money or the inclination to promote, you know, unless you're one of those artists that breathe this air that most of us don't breathe, you know, a normal working artist such as myself. You know, you got to find different ways to get your songs out. And so I think that I think there's a good side. I think people would have the critical mass, people who review records, even though the reviews have been pretty good on this record, would have been much better if I hadn't allowed that song to be used, because then it would have been viewed a whole different way. But they already had, you know, people have good ears and bad ears when they listen to records. You know, I don't like this guy, but I'll listen to it. You know, and I think it would have, you know, because I think it's really a good record. And if you listen to Our Country inside the record, of course, it means nothing.
Right.
What the commercial means, the way that Chevrolet's used it. It's a whole different, you know, it's in between 2 songs about, you know, a song called Rural Route, and I think a song called Jim Crow.
Right.
Jim Crow is about racism in America today, and Rural Route is about methamphetamine addiction. And then there's Our Country.
Right.
You know, it's like, well, maybe it's not such a bragging, patriotic song as we thought when we heard it on television. So, you know, with freedom comes responsibility, and I just don't feel that we've been that responsible, and I think that's what Freedom's Road is really addressing.
The album's called Freedom's Road, which is also the name of a great track on the record as well. Tell me a little bit about the origins of that song and when you wrote it, and where you feel it fits into the scope of it, that it was worthwhile to call the album after it.
Well, it was the last song written. There's a line in Freedom's Road that says, "Freedom's Road is a promise to the people." And as soon as I wrote that line, I go, oh, there's the name of the album right there. As soon as I wrote, Freedom's Road is a promise to the people. Which it is, you know, I mean, with I think one of the things that our country has suffered is that, you know, we all talk about this freedom, and we have this freedom, but we don't feel very responsible to it. We're not with freedom comes responsibility, and I just don't feel that we've been that responsible, and I think that's what Freedom's Road is really addressing.
So it's really saying maybe we veered a little bit off the road at some point.
Well, it says Freedom's Road must be under construction.
Right.
Sometimes you wonder what kind of freedom they're talking. You know, I mean, haven't you been watching these politicians on television, and you go, what are you talking about, man? What, you know, and you just kind of think, what kind of freedom is this? You know, what kind of freedom are these kids getting killed for and getting their faces blown off for? You know, what kind of freedom is that? Freedom for what? You know, and I really don't like these politicians who get on television and act like they're speaking for the military. What? This is the whole military feels this way, and you're the spokesman, right? A guy that's like an old gray-haired guy talking about 21-year-old kids. I just did the Intrepid thing down in Texas, where they opened up this hospital that was raised by private investors, and there were it was sad and also interesting that there were these kids, you know, younger than you. I mean, 20 years old, and their faces were totally gone. And I talked to these guys, and some of these guys were going, I don't know why we're there. I don't want to be there. And some were like, you know, well, you know, I'm a soldier, and I follow the commander-in-chief.
I saw some of that on CNN, actually, yeah.
So, you know, I found out, and which my suspicion was, is that the military is as diverse as the community.
Right.
And you can't really have one old senator from South Carolina saying that this is how the military feels. Maybe the guys you know in the military feel that way.
Right.
But how about talking to some of these kids?
Right. As a songwriter, for you, it's obviously, and throughout your career, has been important to get your message out and get your thought process out and your beliefs out through your songs. And I think that's interesting, because when you look at a lot of artists that have accomplished what you've accomplished in your career, people who have, you have 10 top 10 hits, you've got about 20 some odd top 40 hits, all the millions of records sold, it would be very easy for you at this stage of your career to go out and play a greatest hits set every night of all that stuff and not even bother making new music. But it's still very important to you on a number of levels, I would imagine, to still be creative, write songs, and produce new records, right?
Well, you know, I mean, I know a guy that does that, and I kind of admire him for that. He hasn't made a record in 15 years, and he goes out and plays his hits, and I think there's, you know, I understand that surviving is a noble cause. I think that's okay, and I think it's fine for guys who want to do it. But, you know, if I'm going to do something, then I have to, you know, it's not so much getting my message, I mean, to get my thought out, it's just to try to get people to feel good about themselves and take a look at themselves, and come to the conclusion that I've come to is that if you want a better world, it starts with you. It doesn't, you know, I could have made a protest record where I spat back at the administration and said, it's your fault. But the reality is that, well, we were all here too, weren't we? You know, I remember after 9/11, a lot of people just wanting to get even. They didn't care with who. Let's just go get somebody.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and that frightened me, that we could become so vile so quickly. Sure, yeah, I mean, a terrible thing happened, but I mean, if something, let's just put it on a playground. If Johnny hit Jimmy, and then Jimmy went and beat up Joey, that don't work on a playground, does it?
Mm.
I mean, the kid would be in trouble if he'd get sent to principal. Well, that's what we did.
Speaking of playground, you've got a couple of younger kids now that you've been raising, two boys. How have they impacted your songwriting and how you approach making records these days? Have they had an influence on it and the words you write?
Probably, but not consciously. But what's great about those two guys is that, you know, I had Hud with me this morning. I went around and did some interviews, and he's, you know, he's just part of it. He's been around it so much, you know, I don't have to say, come on, come over here. He's just like, you know, he knows the drill. And then Speck is learning how to play guitar, and, you know, he told me, he said that he wants to be, and he plays every day, all the time. He's 11 years old. Played better than me, actually. But he said he wants to be as good as John Mayer.
Yeah, really?
Yeah.
That's a pretty high goal, though.
He said, I'm going to be better than John Mayer or Jimi Hendrix.
Whoa.
Yeah, but I mean, you know, he's 11 years old, you know.
The new album is out there and doing so well. I mean, it entered the charts, your highest charting debut, I imagine, from what I heard, too. So congratulations on that. That's awesome.
Well, you know, chart debuts and, you know, all that's changed so much. In the early 90s, a good friend of mine was editor of Billboard magazine, and he really wrestled with the idea of SoundScan. He didn't really want it. He didn't want SoundScan because he knew that he was going to change the complexion of how rock music was done. But he didn't want to let it go because he was afraid somebody else would buy it and Billboard wouldn't be the premier magazine anymore. But, so, you know, to say it's my highest debut, I mean, I've had #1 albums. But it used to be that, you know, it used to be this business was really fun. I'm not lamenting because I understand that when one door closes, two opens up, and there's a room for opportunity, and the face of this business is changing. But it was really, you know, at one point, the old model when it was working was great because you would spend weeks and months working on a record, and record companies would work on them, and the artists would work on them, and you would build every week your album would climb up the charts, and but now it's all about that first week, man.
Yeah.
You know, and it's going to kill the business. It's killing it already. It's going to kill the movie business. It's going to kill it already. Because what we do, what you guys do, what we all do, we create magic, right? There's no magic in counting beans.
Mm.
That's not what it's about.
Right.
Counting beans is not magic. You know, you guys do these shows every day, and like the director goes, it's going to be great. Because in her mind, you know, she's creating something. She's making something. She has the interest in it. It's magic. And then when the people see it, they think, wow, they do that. Look how great that looks. Same with writing records and recording records. And it used to be the same way with promoting records. It was magic. How did that song become a song that everybody in the country heard? You know? Well, they've taken that magic away.
Mm.
I mean, you know, as soon as SoundScan and BDS started happening, everybody that I knew went, that's the #1 song, I've never even heard it.
Mm.
You know, and of course people like me thought, well, we must be getting old.
And we should explain to the viewers that SoundScan is a way of actually scanning records and counting the exact number sold, as opposed to different ways the chart moved back in the days that you're talking about.
And back in the days that I'm talking about, you could sell, I remember I sold, you know, a lot of, hundreds of thousands of records the first week one of my albums came out, and I came in at like 26.
I worked in a record store when those records came out, and I remember that very well. And the difference between then and now is back then, it would stay at 26 and then go to 24 and 22 and then 10 and then 15.
That was magic.
Now it's 5 and 102.
Yeah, see, that's magic. That was the magic. That was the smoke and mirrors of the music business. And that's when it worked.
Right.
As soon as all this stuff started changing, as soon as everybody tried to get their fingers in the money, as soon as all these record companies became big corporations, as soon as radio stations became big corporations, all these guys wanted to get the money, everything just changed, and it's not so good anymore. Mm. You know, and it used to be, you know, it was great. Of course, you could say, well, you know, there's the internet. Well, yeah, that had part of it. You can't say it's just one thing. But I know that, you know, people ask me why I waited 5 years to make an album. I didn't really want to make a record. Mm. You know, for what? For that first week?
Right.
I still listen to songs and go, how the did they do that?
You mentioned the internet, John, and it's interesting because I read where you have an iPod that some of the source stuff actually you transferred over from, was it vinyl or
Sure.
open reel tape?
Sure.
Those are the records that are sacred to you, your influences and things like that. Tell us a little bit about that, because it's an interesting stew when you look at everything from Woody Guthrie to the late, great James Brown, of the people that had made an impression on you and helped you develop to be the songwriter you are today.
Well, I'm a very indiscriminate music listener. You know, I don't, when you're a young person, you listen to records and these artists, at least I don't know anymore, but, you know, when I was a kid, these artists would speak, you know, I like Lou Reed, so he's representing kind of who I am. I like REM, they represent who I am. I like Pearl Jam, they represent who I am. And young people do that. And that's great. and that's the way it should be. But eventually you grow out of that, and then all of a sudden music just becomes fantastic for some of us.
Mm-hmm.
For me, it's fantastic. I still listen to songs and go, how the did they do that? How did that happen? It's so beautiful. It's, you know, it's just fantastic. It's great. And so, you know, I've got like, I don't know, 12,000 songs on my iPod, and I bet you maybe a fourth of them, a fifth of them are stuff that I have taken from vinyl. Mm. Because I like the way vinyl sounds. I don't like X's and O's. I mean, you can only do so much with an X and an O. They don't really get married. They don't make their own sound. They just are a sound. That's what's great about vinyl.
I like some of those crackles in there add a little texture too.
Well, I don't really like the crackles much. I try not to have crackles, but I know what you mean.
I've got cassettes that I used to record when it was a big deal to take an album and put it on a cassette at home, and you hear the needle drop in the beginning of the cassette. And there's a certain charm about that because it takes you back to the place when you dubbed the thing, you know?
Well, there's a certain innocence to it.
Yeah.
You know, which, you know, is when you start worrying about the shareholders, the innocence leaves.
Yeah, yeah. I read something that I really couldn't believe. I mean, you have a history that goes back so far. I mean, even from your very first album, which you recorded when you were in London, and the stuff you did when you signed with what was a small label at the time here in America after that, you know, Riva and everything that went on, and all the success that you had, the name changes that you had throughout your career. And I read something which astonished me, that you said when you first started out, you actually didn't even know how to write a song.
Oh, no, I didn't. I was a singer in the band, man. I mean, it never dawned on me. James Brown I was in a band called the Crepe Soul, and we did, you know, we did soul music. I came to New York originally to either get a record deal or to enroll in the New York Art Student League and become a painter. Mm-hmm. But that was a lot of money. They wanted a lot of money, and I just got out of college, and I realized that, well, I got my degree, and I don't want to do. So I thought, well, I'm going to come up here and check this out. And I got a record deal before I got the money to go to school. So, yeah, you know, the idea of me writing a song, I mean, I'd written a couple. I mean, I grew up in a house where my dad's only 20 years older than me. And, you know, he had Woody Guthrie records and Odetta records, and they had bongo parties. It was the 50s, you know. And so I was very familiar with those records, and Bob Dylan and Peter, Paul, and Mary. I had an older brother. And so, you know, but the idea of me writing a song, it was just like, why? I can think Papa's got a brand new bag right now. You know, I don't. James already wrote a bunch of good songs. Dylan's already written a bunch of good songs. So when I had my first record, it was like, I didn't quite know what to do. Yeah. Because I was only 22 years old and fresh out of Indiana, and really had no idea of the music business at all. None. Zero. Didn't have any idea. I just loved music.
How do you to me, as a lifelong fan of music, I'm not a musician, I'm not a songwriter, I'm just a fan of music my entire life, and the single most impressive talent to me as a fan is the ability to write songs, to write great songs. I think there's a ton of great singers, a ton of great guitar players. It's one of the things about the whole American Idol craze, which to me is just so kind of off the mark, because to me it's basically karaoke. I mean, these people aren't creating their own music. How did you...
Well, let me ask you a question.
Yeah.
How would you define actors then? I mean, they're not really... Is that karaoke too? I mean... No,
I wouldn't say it's karaoke, but I think the actor is putting a little more into... What, are you missing something?
Yeah, my life. Hey, Jimmy, give me a... It's in my other coat. Sorry, honey.
I think the actor's role there is to interpret what is being written on the pages and what he's getting from the director.
Aren't those kids kind of doing the same thing?
I guess so, and it's not a knock on those kids, but I just feel that the art of great songwriting is something that's kind of being forgotten about a little bit. And I marvel at the ability people like yourself have to write great songs. Where did you get from that point where you didn't know how to write a song at all to suddenly, you know, you're writing these great songs? Was there a course? Was there an influence? Was there one day you just woke up and you said, damn, you know what, those words and music sound good together?
Well, everybody is a songwriter, you know. I mean, I think that everybody's a songwriter, and it's just a matter of actually doing it. You know, I mean, I was able to, thank you, I was able to, and fortunate enough to have the time to sit there and actually do it. Most people go, oh, I tried to write a song and it was terrible.
Mm-hmm.
Well, yeah, my first one was too. And so was, you know, to write on Freedom's Road, I think there's some beautiful songs on there. But there's 10 of them. I probably wrote 50 songs to get those 10.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what people don't understand. It's like, you know, it's like getting your picture taken. A photographer doesn't walk in and go, click, got it. They take thousands of pictures to get one good one. My wife's a model. I've had my picture. I wish I had a nickel for every time I had my picture taken.
Mm-hmm.
You know, click. It doesn't work like that. It's click, 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 click. You know, and it's repetitive. Tiger Woods is the greatest golfer. You know why? Because his swing is always the same. He's done it a billion times. So, having that information, anybody could be a songwriter if you just had the gumption and the tenacity to work on it. Okay, this first one's not any good. Second one, not any good. If I showed you my first paintings, you would go, why did you even want to be a painter? You know, I mean, they're still not great, but, you know, my first paintings were just, I look at them in my lap. And I ask myself, why did you even continue to paint? You know?
Well, it's another important outlet for you. You've done some other things. Obviously, painting is a big part of it. You've done some acting. You've done some film directing yourself. Did all those outlets...
I've done a lot of stuff, you know, and I'm very fortunate.
Yeah.
I mean, can you imagine? I mean, I came here to be a painter. Look at all the stuff I've done.
Yeah.
And you know, I feel very fortunate about that. I think that, you know, in one man's success is hope for us all. And if I can go do it, anybody can go do it.
Yeah.
You know, it's not that I'm so talented or anything like that. It's just that I'm tenacious and I'm Sisyphus. I'm always rolling the rock up the hill. I never see any top. There's no top up there for me. It's just more hill. You know, and I think that you know, if people want to write songs, they can write songs. If they want to act, they can act. People can do whatever they want to do. That's a whole different guy. You know, that guy that made American Fool is not the guy you're talking to.
I want to ask you about something I heard, and this is a rumor that's gone around for a long time, and I don't know if it's actually true, that Jack and Diane, one of your biggest songs, was almost left off
you know, yeah.
of the album. Is that actually true?
Well, because it's a pop song, you know, and pop songs, you know, at least for me, for the writer, it's just like, oh man, you know, the story's awfully thin.
So you're making American Fool, and where does that song come into
Well,
the
see,
process?
here's the whole thing. That's a whole different guy. You know, that guy that made American Fool is not the guy you're talking to.
Right.
That was a kid with a black leather jacket on, who was very swaggering, very arrogant, as were a lot of guys in rock bands at that time. And I have to laugh about that record. I mean, it was just foolish. I mean, it was not that I was just foolish. You know, I was down in Miami and I had the most expensive studio at Criteria, locked out 24 hours a day. I never went. I never went.
Where'd you go?
Well, I had things to do, man. I had other stuff to do. Studio.
And this wasn't the technology they have today where you could just Pro Tools it over. You had to be there.
Oh, yeah, you had to be there. Well, I'm always there all the time anyway, but when records are being made, I'm usually there. But back then, you know, we'd been down there for 3 months and had 2 songs done. 3 songs. 3 songs done. And the record company, of course, was losing their mind. No wonder they went broke. But they came down and they said, you know, spend an awful lot of money down here. You haven't got much work done. And I said, yeah, I know. And they said, well, if this record doesn't really click on, then we're going to drop you from the label, so you better get busy.
And those are the good old days you're talking about, right?
Yeah. Well, but we, the thing of it was is that, the record company left and we just died laughing. That we just thought was funny. I don't know what we thought was so funny looking back on it, but we just didn't take it very seriously. We knew we had to do it. We knew what our job was, but we were very cavalier about how we did it. And, I was playing, hundreds and hundreds of shows each year in bars at that point, which is how I wrote Hurt So Good. I mean, it was like you spend 3 or 4 hours on stage in a bar, and then you see what happens after the bar is over, which is how Hurt So Good came about. It was the 70s, and the sexual revolution was coming to an end, a big crash, and everybody was wanting to get in on it, and it was really great to see, an interesting time to be in a rock band. It was fantastic. I wouldn't trade it for anything, and I look back at that guy who made that record, and I was so lighthearted, about music. The music was just like part of my day. It really wasn't like the main focus. It was just, oh yeah, go to the studio today. Well, what do you want to do? Well, we don't have anything to do. You haven't got any songs written. Oh yeah, well, let's do this instead.
When you perform live, does it still, whether it be,
and I want to say that I'm not talking. I never took drugs or drank.
Right.
It wasn't ever drug usage or drinking. It was other things, motorcycles and other stuff.
When you perform those old songs live, though, I imagine it takes you back to those days somewhat on stage, because those songs will be with you forever, no matter even if you are the different John Mellencamp now. You're always going to have to do them live, and they're always going to be a part of you. Does this kind of flash back a little bit? With whatever you're doing, that you're like, yeah, I remember bumming around Miami when I was supposed to be in the studio when I did this.
I had a motorcycle wreck, and I tore my leg out real bad 2 days before I started that record. And I was going to drive my motorcycle around Miami. And I was really bummed out because my leg was like this. I was on crutches, So I went ahead and sent my motorcycle down anyway. And I got down there, and I figured out how to ride the motorcycle. It was a Harley Davidson, and I figured out how to ride it with how to shift gears. But then I got down there, and they had a helmet law, which means you had to have a motorcycle helmet to drive. I thought, oh, man, I don't want to wear no stupid helmet, So my guitar player and I, Mike said, well, let's just put Tupperware on our head. The cops will see us go by, it'll be color. So he cut this, we put these pieces of Tupperware on our head, and I'm driving down the road. Mike's holding my crutches.
Did you paint them at all or anything?
No, they were already like blue or something, And we're driving down the road. Mike's got the crutches in his hand, and this cop pulls us over. I thought, oh. And he walked up and he looked at, I remember like he goes, you guys are kidding, right?
Did you let you slide?
Well, listen, and I just said, what? What do you mean, kidding about what? He said, let me guess, your leg is broke because of this motorcycle. And I said, yeah, not this one, but a motorcycle. He says, I'm so surprised. You're using such good judgment here. You have Tupperware on your head, trying to fool me that it's a motorcycle helmet. He said, I'll tell you guys what. I said, we're just going over to that recording studio. He goes, how did I guess? How did I guess you were musicians?
Right.
And he said, go ahead, but if I see you guys with Tupperware on your head, if I see you guys with Tupperware on your head again, I'm going to arrest you.
Unfortunately, we only have a few more minutes. There's a couple quick things I want to ask you about. What's the latest on the Farm Aid front? What can you tell us on upcoming projects or events?
Well, Farm Aid, I think, is going to take place in New York City next year.
Oh, okay.
Fantastic. I've been hoping that would happen for quite some time, and and we've raised something like $30 million now. And Farm Aid is always in motion. There's always, right when you think you see an end to something else happens. And, a few years ago, Willie Neal and I were talking, and how naive we were when we started Farm Aid. We didn't know Willie didn't know he started Farm Aid. He thought we were going to do a concert, and that would be it. We'll do this show, and we'll get all these artists to come, and the government will see the error in the laws that they've passed about the American farmer, and they'll change these laws because it's the right thing to do. And
one and done.
Yeah. Wow.
How many years ago was that, Joe?
So 30-some years later.
So New York City, so that's very cool. That's something to look forward to. We're here, so I'm sure we'll look forward to checking that out. And I also want to ask you about a collaboration I hear you doing with Stephen King. What can you tell me about that?
Well, Steve and I have been working on this musical for 4 years. Steve has got an original story that's fantastic. And I've written about 17, 18 songs for this thing. And, we don't really know what we're doing. So, he's got a real job and I've got a different job. And so we're trying to make this thing work. It's, we're looking, I think we finally have found a director, which is an important thing for us because now we've got to take Steve's words and make them come to life. And so hopefully this summer we'll workshop this thing someplace, maybe in Houston or Chicago or somewhere, and see if the songs work and see if the story works and and like that, and see what happens.
And the final question, of course, the current album, Freedom's Road. Do you find does it sometimes get frustrating to you because you make this music, you do things like Farm Aid and charitable efforts like that? Do you feel that some people, though, say, well, you know what, I'm not even going to bother trying to do anything because what can I do? I'm just one person. They don't work for change because they feel like they just don't have enough. There's just not enough of they can do enough individually to make a difference?
Well, I understand that, I think that's one of the bad things about our society is the way that people are made to feel. I don't think it's innate that people want to feel like hell or are not interested enough to. But I think it's the, there's a lot of things that play into people's self-image, and minimum wage and, people in this country don't have a working, we don't, like $5 an hour. Is that what the wage is? $5.35? I mean, that's not much money an hour, is it?
No.
I don't know how you could support a family on that.
Right.
But, I know that there's a large portion of the Congress who think that that's fine, as they give themselves a raise. So, I mean, there's a lot of things that feed into that. And plus, if you're not making a living wage, man, it's hard, and surviving is a noble enough cause. I mean, let alone trying to change something, to be involved in Farm Aid. Oh, I'm lucky to be able to be involved in Farm Aid. But I understand people who don't really have the time or the understanding or the self-image to do that because, like I said an hour ago when we started, there's a responsibility that comes with freedom. And it's all of our responsibility by the people, great line written by Larry McMurtry, who's an author. He's written a lot of really wonderful books. Slowly but surely, this country changes by the people we admire. And he's right.
Well, I can't think of a better way to wrap it up. And with that, Freedom's Road is the new album from John Mellencamp. And John, on behalf of all the music fans out there, thanks for the decades of great music.
Thank you very much.
Much appreciated, and continued success with the record, and I'm sure some upcoming tour dates as well. So thanks for coming by the H1 Classic.
Thank you. I have to say that generally most songs are never finished; they're only abandoned. So, but it's at that moment where you think, okay, I think this is pretty close to it, and you lay it down for the first time, and it's at that point that for me, is the most fun. The most important part of the song is the melody. With a good melody, you can just about say anything. I don't even know what a heartland rocker is. What is it? The drum beat? What? I don't get that phrase. I've never gotten that phrase. I don't even know what, I don't, to me I don't even know what the people are talking about.